For most people, it's one of those times that you knew where you were when you heard the tragic news of Diana's death. Across Canada, that news came from a trusted anchor.
I'm Lloyd Robertson for CTV News. The calm of this holiday weekend has been shattered across Canada and all over North America and the world this morning by the news out of Paris of the tragic and untimely death of Diana, Princess of Wales.
And I want to bring in CTV's special correspondent, Lloyd Robertson. He's with me in studio this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to be with you, Marcia.
When you see that video of yourself now, what memories does it bring back?
Well, apart from the fact that who was that young guy, it certainly brings back the memory of that morning at Kensington Palace, because seeing Kensington Palace today adorned with all the flowers, but I recall the silence in the London streets, and then the audible cries of Diana, Diana, when the hearse carrying her body and the gun carriage came through the gates out into the streets. And then that iconic picture, of course, of the boys and the Duke and Charles walking behind the casket of Diana.
And I think just the sense that night when we learned that there had been a car crash and that Diana was involved, the sense of disbelief lingered for days. We just couldn't believe it.
Well, what struck me more than anything, I have 4 daughters, and 2 of them expressed to me that morning, very early in the morning, that they were in tears. They couldn't sleep because of this. She really reached out and touched people. And I think someone in front of Kensington Palace just the other day expressed it best when they said, yes, she was royal, but she was ordinary just like us. She was one of us because she reached out and she touched people. And I think her legacy is perhaps best expressed these days through William, who has his grandmother's reserve, but his mother's accessibility and her humanity. And that's really what Diana brought to the royal family. The Queen took a long time to recognize that. Just 2016, she said publicly for the first time, I think we have a lot to thank Diana for. But of course, she knew that week from the outrage, the simmering outrage in the British public, that they were unhappy with the reaction of the royal family, with the sort of tentative way they responded to the death. And she made a speech during that time, a few days after Diana's death, in which she put it all to rest, that they did support Diana, that they liked her. But it took a long time for her to really come out and say, she did give us something. She gave us a lot.
Not just glamour. She gave much more. She gave that sense of humanity and relatability. Now, she was in Toronto in 1991, and there is a famous photo that was taken here. Many people may not know this, at Casey House, and it went around the world.
Yes, this was before the days of all of the social media we have now. But yes, that is the iconic picture of Diana shaking hands with an AIDS patient. And if you talk to the people from Casey House about that visit, they said she walked in, she was totally unpretentious. Indeed, she sat on a windowsill, talked to the patients, went over and shook this young man's hand. And that was the first time that anyone of her stature, as far as we know, had shaken hands with an AIDS patient. And around the world went that picture. I met her on this trip in 1991 on the Royal Yacht Britannia anchored in Toronto Harbour. And there were a lot of rumors going on
about the marriage.
About the marriage falling apart. And you could see that she was kind of deer in the headlights. She had that look about her when I met her, and we talked about the weather, what else, because it was a miserable night in Toronto. I said, we're importing some of the London weather for you, ma'am. And then a few minutes later, Charles was there, and he was the master, of course, of decorum, and nothing could affect him. No matter what was going on in his marriage, he was going to be polite and reserved and say just the right things. So you could see the difference, but she looked uncomfortable. She looked, and you could see it with the way she responded to the boys. When the boys came to join them on the Royal Yacht here, on the Royal Yacht in Toronto, she greeted them with open arms, embraced them. Huge hugs. That's another picture that's still being shown. Charles came along a little while later, said hi to 2 boys, and into the
shook their hand.
Ship he went. Yeah.
Lloyd, thank you for being part of this coverage today. Really appreciate it, and always great to see you.
Thanks, Marcia.